When Chuck Norris walked onto the Tonight Show stage on March 8, 1983, something happened that had never occurred in the show's 21-year history. Johnny Carson, the man who had interviewed presidents, Hollywood legends, and the biggest stars in the world, froze completely. His famous smile vanished. His hands gripped the edge of his desk so hard his knuckles turned white. And when Chuck extended his hand for the traditional handshake, Johnny did something that made Ed McMahon drop his coffee mug. He stepped backward. The studio audience of 412 people went completely silent. The cameras kept rolling, capturing 30 million Americans watching live as the king of late night appeared genuinely terrified of his own guest. But this wasn't about Chuck Norris's martial arts skills. This wasn't about his action movies or his black belt reputation. What Johnny Carson saw that night, what made him physically recoil in front of the entire nation, was something far more personal. Something that connected these two men through a secret neither had ever spoken about publicly. A secret that went back 19 years to a dark alley in San Francisco where a young television host was about to die, and a stranger with lightning-fast reflexes changed everything. I see messages all the time in the comments section that some of you didn't realize you didn't subscribe. So, if you could do me a favor and double-check if you're a subscriber to this channel, that would be tremendously appreciated. It's the simple, free thing that anybody that watches this show frequently can do to help us here too. Keep everything going in this show in the trajectory it's on. So, please do double-check. If you've subscribed, and thank you so much. Because in a strange way, you are part of our history. And you're on this journey with us. And I appreciate you for that. If you're already feeling this story, drop a like right now and tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight. Because what happened between these two men will change the way you see courage forever. The moment Chuck Norris sat down in that guest chair, Johnny's entire demeanor shifted. Gone was the smooth, practiced charm. Gone was the quick wit and easy smile that America had come to love. Instead, Johnny Carson looked like a man staring at a ghost from his past. A ghost that had saved his life, but cost him something he could never get back. To understand what happened that March night in 1983, you need to go back to May 17th, 1964. Johnny Carson had only been hosting The Tonight Show for 2 years. He was 38 years old, newly divorced, drinking too much, and spiraling into a depression that nobody at NBC knew about. The cameras saw the charming host. Behind closed doors, Johnny was falling apart. That night, Johnny had finished taping the show at 5:30 p.m. Instead of going home to his empty apartment in Manhattan, he made a decision that almost killed him. He drove to San Francisco, no explanation to his producers, no warning to his staff. He just got in his car and drove for 7 hours straight, drinking scotch from a flask the entire way. Johnny arrived in San Francisco at 2:47 in the morning. He parked his car in a dark alley off Market Street and sat there in the driver's seat, crying. The truth was, Johnny Carson was thinking about ending it all. The pressure of the show, the loneliness, the constant performance. It had broken something inside him. And that night, in that dark San Francisco alley, he had decided this would be his last night on Earth. What Johnny didn't know was that someone was watching him. In the shadows of that alley, a 24-year-old Air Force serviceman named Carlos Ray Norris who would later become known as Chuck Norris, was finishing his night shift at a nearby security company. Chuck had seen Johnny's car pull in. He'd watched this well-dressed man sit alone in the darkness, and something told him to stay. At 3:15 a.m., 3 men approached Johnny's car. They weren't good Samaritans. They were armed. They yanked Johnny's door open, dragged him out onto the pavement, and demanded his wallet. Johnny, drunk and emotionally destroyed, didn't even resist. He just lay there on the cold concrete, almost welcoming whatever was about to happen. One of the attackers raised his gun and pointed it directly at Johnny's head, and that's when Chuck Norris moved. What happened next took exactly 4.2 seconds, but those seconds would connect these 2 men for the next 19 years in a bond of silence, shame, and unspoken gratitude. Chuck moved through those 3 armed men like a force of nature. A spinning kick disarmed the first one. An elbow strike dropped the second. The third man with the gun aimed at Chuck. But before he could pull the trigger, Chuck's hand struck his wrist with such precision that the gun went flying into the darkness. All 3 attackers ran, disappearing into the San Francisco night. Chuck Norris knelt beside Johnny Carson, who was lying on the pavement, still drunk, still broken, still wishing he had never been saved. Johnny looked up at this young stranger in an Air Force jacket and whispered 4 words that would haunt them both. "You should have let me die." Chuck didn't judge. He didn't lecture. He just helped Johnny to his feet, walked him to a 24-hour diner 3 blocks away, and ordered him coffee. For 2 hours, Johnny Carson, the most famous television host in America, poured his heart out to a complete stranger. He talked about the pressure of being on every single night, about the divorce that had shattered him, about the loneliness of fame, about how he had driven to San Francisco that night with the intention of driving his car off the Golden Gate Bridge. Chuck listened to everything. And when Johnny finally stopped talking, when the sun was starting to rise over San Francisco, Chuck said something that Johnny would never forget. "Mr. Carson, I don't know much about television or fame or any of that, but I know this. Millions of people count on you to make them smile. That's not a burden, that's a purpose. And if you throw that away, you're not just ending your life. You're ending the hope of everyone who needs that smile." Johnny stared at this young martial artist who seemed to understand something that all of Johnny's Hollywood friends had missed. Before they parted ways, Chuck made Johnny promise 3 things. First, Johnny had to get help, real help, not just surface fixes. Second, Johnny had to use his pain to connect with people more deeply, to let his vulnerability show through his comedy. And third, this was the hardest promise, Johnny could never tell anyone about this night. Not his producers, not his friends, not the public. Because if this story ever got out, it would define Johnny's entire legacy, and Chuck didn't want to be known as the man who saved Johnny Carson. He wanted to remain invisible. Johnny Carson kept all 3 promises. He found a therapist. He started channeling his pain into his performances, creating moments of genuine connection that made The Tonight Show legendary. And he never spoke about that night in San Francisco. Until March 8th, 1983, when Chuck Norris walked onto his stage for the first time, and everything Johnny had buried for 19 years came flooding back. The moment Chuck Norris sat down in the guest chair, Johnny Carson's carefully constructed wall of silence began to crack. For the first 7 minutes, everything seemed normal. they talked about Chuck's new movie, Lone Wolf McQuade. They joked about martial arts training. The audience laughed at all the right moments. But Johnny's hands were shaking. Chuck noticed. Ed McMahon noticed. And then Johnny asked a question that changed everything. "Chuck, you've saved a lot of people on screen. Have you ever saved anyone in real life?" The studio went quiet. Chuck looked directly into Johnny's eyes with an expression that carried 19 years of shared secret. "Once, Johnny, a long time ago in San Francisco. But the man I saved that night, he saved me right back. He taught me something about courage I'd never understood before." Johnny's voice cracked. "What did he teach you?" "He taught me that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is keep living when dying feels easier. He taught me that vulnerability isn't weakness, it's strength. And he taught me that real heroes aren't the ones who throw punches. They're the ones who show up every day and make people smile, even when they're breaking inside." The cameras captured tears streaming down Johnny Carson's face. This was unprecedented. Johnny never cried on camera, never showed this level of emotion. But there was something about Chuck Norris's words, something about the way he was honoring that night without exposing the details, that broke Johnny completely. Johnny turned to the camera, his voice thick with emotion. "Ladies and gentlemen, I need to tell you something. 19 years ago, I was in the darkest place of my life. I had given up. And someone I had never met, someone who had no reason to care about me, saved my life. Not just physically, he saved my soul. And for 19 years, I've honored his request to keep that night private. But tonight, sitting here with Chuck Norris, I realize something. That night didn't just save my life. It taught me how to live." The studio audience was crying. Ed McMahon had his face in his hands. And Chuck Norris, the tough guy action star, had tears in his own eyes as he reached across and gripped Johnny's hand. "You kept all 3 promises, Johnny. Every single one. And look what you built. Look at what you became. That broken man in the alley, he's gone. This man right here, the one who makes millions of people smile, that's who you were meant to be." Johnny wiped his eyes and smiled. Not his professional smile, but something real. "Chuck, why did you do it? Why did a stranger save someone he didn't know?" Chuck's answer would become one of the most quoted moments in television history. "Because I saw in your eyes what I'd felt in my own heart a year earlier, when I was stationed overseas, feeling lost and purposeless. Someone had shown me kindness when I didn't deserve it. And I learned that we're not put on this earth to walk past people who are hurting. We're here to stop, to reach out, and to remind them that tomorrow might be the day everything changes." Johnny turned to the audience one final time. "If you're watching this tonight and you're in a dark place, if you feel like giving up, I want you to know something. I've been there. I stood on the edge of ending everything. And someone I didn't know pulled me back. Don't give up. Find your Chuck Norris. Find your reason. Because the world needs your smile, whatever form it takes." The Tonight Show episode from March 8, 1983, became the most replayed broadcast in the show's history. NBC received over 200,000 letters in the following weeks from people sharing their own stories of despair and rescue. Crisis hotlines reported a 47% increase in calls from people seeking help instead of giving up. And Johnny Carson and Chuck Norris forged a friendship that would last until Johnny's death in 2005. At Johnny's funeral, Chuck Norris stood at the podium and said something that brought everyone to tears. In May of 1964, I saved a man's life in a dark alley, but the truth is, he saved mine right back. He showed me that the smallest act of kindness can change the entire trajectory of someone's existence. Johnny Carson didn't just make America laugh. He taught us that it's okay to be broken, as long as we keep showing up. If this story moved you, share it with someone who might be in a dark place right now. Subscribe to this channel for more powerful true stories. And remember, you never know whose life you might save just by showing up and paying attention. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. You're part of this legacy now, and that matters. That really matters.